Thanks to the organisers today for the opportunity to introduce Amryt Pharma to you. Amryt has gone through some spectacularly interesting times of late. To describe 2019 as a transformational year really is an understatement. And I'll go through that and talk you through what we've been doing and what we're planning for the future. So the traditional disclaimer in these situations. So what are we trying to do at Amryt? We're building a commercial, orphan, rare disease biopharmaceutical company and targeting areas of very high unmet medical need. So people often say, what is an orphan disease? So orphan diseases do have a very specific designations in both Europe and the US. So in Europe, it's a disease or a disorder for which there are less than 5 in 10,000 patients. In the US, it's less than 200,000 patients in total. If I gave this presentation 3 months ago, I would have told you that in 2018 we'd had revenues of $16 million. We've just made a significant transaction and acquired a company called Kieran Pharmaceuticals, a US biopharmaceutical company. So the built-in revenues of the two organizations in 2018 were $136.5 million. We have a very strong commercial, clinical, regulatory team, and I'll talk you through the folks that we have in place. They are really very, very capable guys, been there, done it. We also have a very strong pipeline of development assets, and also using some of the assets that we already have and looking at alternative indications for those. Like many other pharma companies, we have assets in development. We have a phase 3 asset in a condition called epidermolysis bullosa. Now, analysts estimate that market opportunity is in excess of $1 billion. Clearly, we don't believe we'll get all of that, but even if we get a portion of that, it's a very significant opportunity. My role at Amryt is very much around licensing, business development, and a key part of what we're doing in this business is growing it through the in-licensing assets, preferably later stage, so that we continue to build this as a commercial stage rare and orphan disease biopharmaceutical company. In truth, we've not been around very long, but we've done a lot in a very short period of time. So we started in 2015 as a business. We were in stealth mode effectively for the first year, and then we came out of cover in 2016 by acquiring 2 companies and reversing onto the AIM market as a way of IPOing here in the UK. In the same year, we in-licensed a product called Lojuxta from Kieran Pharmaceuticals and began to build a relationship with that company. 2017, we commenced the largest global phase 3 study that's ever been conducted in epidermolysis bullosa. 2018, we then continued to grow out the territories of Lojuxta. We got pediatric rare disease designation for AP101, and I'll talk a little about that in a moment. And we also in-licensed a novel non-viral gene therapy platform from University College Dublin, which we now describe as AP103. This year has, as I say, has been a momentous year for us. At the beginning of the year, we had effectively a positive interim efficacy analysis in our phase 3 study, which gave us a lot of hope moving forward with that asset. And as I mentioned, we've just closed the acquisition of Kieran Pharmaceuticals with, as I said, built-in revenues of $136.5 million. Very recently, we put out a press release to tell the world that we now have fast-track designation for AP101. So a little about the investment case in Amryt and what we are as a business. So as I say, we're a revenue generating and a growing rare and orphan disease company with an exciting portfolio of commercial assets and late-stage development assets. We have life cycle opportunities with some of the existing assets we already have, so we don't necessarily need to in-license new assets straight away. We have a spectacularly experienced management team, and it's a scalable, very much a scalable business, commercial, regulatory, clinical business. And really, it's all about the capacity to deliver those sustained revenues over time both in terms of the revenues themselves, but also ensuring that we continue to build the pipeline and we grow the markets that we have. And we're really, when it comes to the finances, what are we doing here? It's all about flexibility. And when I talk a little about Agirion as a business, some of the challenges that they faced over the years, the financial situation that they found themselves in didn't really enable them to do the kind of things that we now will be able to do as a combined business. I'll talk about that as well. This is the big one. This closed on the 25th of September. So we've been in conversation for a long time with Agirion Pharmaceuticals. They are a US, or were a US biopharma. I was actually over in Boston last week. We now have a Boston office. We have now effectively a global rare and orphan disease business with 2 assets on the market in Europe, US, and Latin America. Lojuxta, Juxtapid Lojuxta is the name of the product Lomitipide here in Europe. Juxtapid is the name of that product in the US. It is always confusing when you have 2 different names, but that's just the way that things have worked out. The other asset being Metroleptin, which is known as Mylept in the US and Mylepta. I've described the revenues, and in essence what we're doing here is reuniting the Lomitipide brand. We've done an extremely good job with that asset since we licensed that in 2016. We doubled revenues within around about 18 months following acquisition of that asset. And the expertise and the experience we have as a group in growing commercial assets here in Europe, and that will enable us to continue to take some of those learnings into the US and grow those assets in the US. My CEO, Joe Wiley, describes Agirion as a great company was a great company with 2 assets, but unfortunately it had a broken balance sheet for a whole number of reasons. And one of the things that we're doing as a business really is looking for expense synergies over the next 12 months. So Agirion was historically based in Boston. What we will be doing is bringing a lot of the back office roles, if you like, over to Dublin, which is our HQ. We're based in Dublin, not for tax reasons, but because the guys who set the business are Irish. And it's about really establishing that appropriate capital structure for the business that will really enable us to grow this over time. A little about the leadership team. So Joe Wiley is our CEO. Joe is a medic by training. He's also a guy who spent time in venture capital and private equity, so he knows medicine and he knows finance. Dave Almond is probably one of the best chief commercial officers that any pharmaceutical company could ever have. He was the 3rd person that Celgene Pharmaceuticals hired here in Europe and then ended up as corporate vice president of global marketing at Celgene in the US. Rory, our CFO, has a huge amount of experience on NASDAQ. He's been involved in multiple different organizations over the years. And you'll see here there's a number of the team have spent time at Agirion. So we acquired the business, we understand the business, we know what the challenges for those assets are, and we know how to grow those assets moving forward. We now have a global presence. Historically, we were very much a European company, European, Middle East, North Africa, and had grown into Russia CIS. However, now we have a US presence, or should I say a North American presence. We also have a LATAM presence. So we're as global as most other companies in this space. These assets are actually out-licensed in Japan, so whilst we own the assets, we get royalties, milestones and royalties from pharmaceutical companies in Japan who have licensed these assets. So what's the vision and strategy here? It's creating a global biopharmaceutical company that's dedicated to developing and commercializing innovative assets in the rare and orphan disease space. And these patients have truly hideous lives most of the time. They suffer conditions that are terribly distressing and make their lives very, very difficult. So, whilst we are a commercial business, we're very much focused on patients all the time. So we have our commercial assets, Lojuxta, Juxtapid, Mylepta. We are building a global epidermolysis bullosa franchise. We also are developing looking at life cycle opportunities for our existing assets. And we are continuing to explore other in-licensing opportunities. We want to continue to grow this business through in-licensing assets in the market. A little about Lojuxta, Juxtapid. This is a product that's approved in both Europe and the US as an adjunct to diet to treat patients with, or to treat adults with homozygous familial hypercholesterolemia. So homozygous I can't even say it now. Homozygous familial hypercholesterolemia, or HoFH, is a genetic disorder. And in essence, these patients have LDL-C, so that's bad cholesterol levels that are about 10 times the average range. So these patients will often have heart attacks by the time they're 2 years old. If they live into their 20s, they'll be very fortunate. This product has patent protection in the US to mid-2027 and in Europe to 2028. And in 2018 had global revenues of 64 million. So as I mentioned earlier, what we're doing here is we've done well as a company with this asset. We've grown it very significantly in Europe and in the Middle East. So for example, if you go into a single hospital in Riyadh, for example, you'll see as many HoF patients as you would in the entire UK. So we've been very focused on the territories where where there are opportunities for growth here. So we'll be deploying some of that strategy, which we've adopted around Lojuxta, to drive Juxtapid in the US. We're also looking at life cycle opportunities here in a condition called familial chylomicronemia syndrome. So this is actually quite similar to HoFH, but this is patients who essentially can't get rid of fat, and as a consequence, they have a whole array of metabolic disorders as a consequence. Mylepta is a significant global opportunity for growth for the business. This was approved in the US. Let me tell you a little about the condition. So this is approved for a thing called lipodystrophy. So in essence, there are two main types of lipodystrophy: generalized and partial. So lipodystrophies are conditions that occur when you have very little subcutaneous adipose tissue. And along with that comes very low levels of leptin, and as a consequence you get this array of metabolic disorders ranging from very severe diabetes that's effectively almost untreatable. You have very high levels of triglycerides. You end up with fatty liver disease. So generalized lipodystrophy is effectively when you have no adipose tissue whatsoever. Partial lipodystrophy, obviously as the name suggests, you have you have some adipose tissue, and as a consequence, there is some secretion of leptin. So this is used as an adjunct to diet for the complications of leptin deficiency in patients. It's approved in the US only for generalized lipodystrophy. So the prevalence of generalized lipodystrophy is about 1 in a million. In Europe, it's only recently been approved, so in July 2018, for the treatment of both generalized and partial lipodystrophy. So partial lipodystrophy prevalence is about 3 in a million. So the opportunity there that we're looking at this point in time is getting this product approved in the US for partial lipodystrophy as well as generalized lipodystrophy. So you can see the revenues here in 2018 of 71.4 million. As I said, this has only recently been launched in Europe. We're going through the process of getting this approved in different markets, getting the product reimbursed in different markets at this point in time. I'll skip over this in the interest of time because in essence it's telling you what the previous slides have already told you. I'll tell you a little now about our development pipeline. As I mentioned, AP101 is our lead development asset. That's targeting dystrophic epidermolysis and junctional epidermolysis bullosa. Mylept, we are looking at partial lipodystrophy, as I mentioned. That's currently in phase 2. We're looking at Lojuxta in pediatric patients with HoFH. So patients with HoFH are, this is a genetic disorder, so they are born with this condition. So we're now looking very specifically at the pediatric population for this. And also with juxtapiddle juxta in familial chylomicronemia syndrome. AP101 is an interesting asset. Historically, it was developed by a German company. We acquired that German company. It was actually approved back in 2015 for the treatment of partial thickness wounds. We acquired the company at that point in time. However, we didn't launch the asset because we're a rare and orphan disease company. So what we've looked at are subsets of partial thickness wounds where there is an opportunity for this product. So there are very rare conditions. There's one called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, SJS, or toxic epidermal necrolysis syndrome, radiation-induced dermatitis. These are all effectively orphan diseases for which this product has the potential to be approved. AP103 is our recessive dystrophic EB asset. This is our non-viral gene therapy platform, and I'll talk a little about that when we're also looking at that asset in a number of other indications as well. Epidermolysis bullosa. EB is probably, as the patient advocacy group who handle patients, who look after patients with epidermolysis bullosa, call it the worst disease you've never heard of. And I make no apologies for the images that I'm about to show you. So these kids are born without specific proteins in their skin. So kids with recessive dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa lack a thing called collagen 7. So you can imagine collagen 7 effectively being the Velcro that holds the dermis and the epidermis together. So these kids are born without that. So any minor insult, so if they banged their arm against this lectern, for example, their skin would fall away. So this is truly a hideous condition. So what AP101 does is promote the differentiation and migration of keratinocytes or skin cells to accelerate wound healing. And we're now currently in the largest phase 3 study that's ever been conducted in this condition worldwide. We had an unblinded interim efficacy analysis earlier this year that gave us a lot of confidence moving forward that we'll have the best possible chance of having a positive outcome in this condition. As I mentioned, the analysts on Wall Street believe that this market opportunity is worth in excess of $1 billion. A small proof of concept study was conducted back in the day by the German company that we acquired. We felt that the data that came out of that was very strong, and as a consequence, we then moved into this condition and are conducting this study. So this is called the E study, this phase 3. In essence, what we're doing is comparing our product, and so in essence, the product is applied to a dressing and then applied to the wound. As always in pharmaceutical development, you have to conduct or have to have a placebo arm. So we're using a placebo gel, applying that to a dressing, and then applying that to the wounds. So in essence, what we're looking at is the primary efficacy endpoint in effect is, trying to demonstrate that this actually works. So that primary efficacy endpoint is the proportion of target wounds which have healed by day 45. So these patients see their pediatric dermatologist on a regular basis, or the carers will come along with them and take them to the pediatric dermatologist on a regular basis. So by the end of this year, we believe we will have fully recruited this study, and we are anticipating top-line data in the first half of 2020. In the interest of time, I'll just focus on one particular issue here. So we got, back in 2018, we got pediatric rare disease designation for this asset. Now, this is a strategy, in essence, that the FDA have adopted to get products like this onto the market rapidly. If you get this product onto the market, and if it's approved and gets onto the market, you are then given what's called a priority review voucher. Priority review vouchers actually now have a secondary market. So pharmaceutical companies want to get these because it cuts the time from getting the product approved to actually getting the product on the market. So we couldn't use this for our existing product. We would have to use it for another product further down the line. But to give you an example, one of these traded recently for $95 million. So Sobi, a Scandinavian biopharmaceutical company, sold to AstraZeneca one of these priority review vouchers for $95 million. Very briefly, again in the interest of time, AP103 is our gene therapy platform. This is a non-viral. So most gene therapy platforms, or most gene therapies use viral vectors to actually get the DNA into the cell. This uses highly branched polyamino ester polymers to do that. We're focusing here specifically on recessive dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa. What we do here is we wrap up plasmid DNA in these highly branched polymers. We apply it topically to the skin. There's a couple of images, or 3 images here on the right-hand side of this, on the right-hand side of the screen as you're looking at it. In essence, what we're doing here is we're applying this product to. So this is in a mouse model. We're applying this product to the skin, and here you can see after a single application, 1 month after a single application, you can see a slight pink line here. That pink line is collagen 7. So this is, in essence, what we're doing here is we're bringing back the Velcro, which is missing in the skin. And after 3 administrations, you can see a very bright pink line here. So again, this is demonstrating that this collagen 7 is being replaced. So again, this is early stage. This is in preclinical at this point in time, but we believe this is a very significant opportunity. We have a number of interesting upcoming news flow events occurring over the relatively short term. I guess the most interesting one is the AP101 top-line data in 2020. But obviously, you'll all receive copies of this deck, so you can review these at your leisure. Again, just very briefly, we are a revenue-generating and growing rare disease orphan company. We have a really exciting portfolio both of commercial assets and also late-stage development assets, highly experienced management team, very scalable commercial, regulatory, clinical infrastructure. And now we have the financial flexibility to go out there and do really interesting stuff in the market for these patients. So thanks for your time.
Questions for Kieran, please? Developing the business through acquisition and bringing other organisations or other products into the firm, as well as developing your own products there. Do you see are there other firms out there which have kind of distressed balance sheets or in difficult financial situations that you think they're going to be synergies and scale, and that's a way of kind of building the business?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really difficult to build a business like this because it comes up with a bunch of challenges along the way. However, we've got the management team, the skills and the experience to be able to identify those, to understand what the deal flow looks like. It's all about keeping in contact with the investment bankers, both on this side of the Atlantic, on the other side of the Atlantic, to identify where those opportunities. We see them on a regular basis. We see opportunities coming in pretty much every month at this point in time. Being realistic, this is a really significant transaction that we've just executed. Would we want to do another of these in the immediate short term? We want to integrate this, and we want to be successful here, and we want to we want to deliver on what the expectations are in the market around this. But absolutely, we continue to look for those opportunities.
Got one final one then. A gentleman here, please. I'll give you the microphone if you don't mind.
Could I just ask, did the company, was it born out of Fastnet or some
Yeah,
stage?
so it's in essence, when the company was formed, we reversed into Fastnet. That's how Amryt was formed. So historically, it was in a totally different sector to where we are now. But it was an efficient way of getting onto the market at that point in time, and that was part of. Through the initial formation of Amryt, we had an agreement with one of the companies that we were acquiring that we would take the company public, and that was an efficient way of doing it.